Okay, welcome to another Orbiter 2010 video, and this is a continuation of the Learn With Me, the Mars to Jupiter Learn With Me that I'm doing. And in the last couple of videos we tried to do an atmospheric braking at Jupiter, but apparently I cannot figure out how to make that work. We're coming into Jupiter with an extremely high velocity, and by the time we get down into the atmosphere, we are burning up or having other problems. Even if we don't come in low enough, then we're not getting any atmospheric braking at all. And then if we go in low enough that we're getting atmospheric braking, we burn up. So it's like a lose-lose situation, and I can't seem to resolve it. So this time, I'm going to forego atmospheric braking. At least for now, I'm going to give up on it and just see what it takes to just do main engine retrograde burn to get into a parking orbit. So let's go ahead and warp time ahead, get over to Jupiter, and when we're fairly close, we'll set up a transx maneuver. We're getting pretty close, so let's do this. We will bring up transx, and I think we probably want the encounter view over here, and we'll set up the maneuver on this side. Now the first thing I need to do here is adjust the date. I'm saying that I'm going to reach periapsis at this date, so I want to do the maneuver at that time. So the first thing I'm going to do is bump the date forward to 5851. Very important that you don't forget to do that step, and it's easy to forget. So, oops, I actually need to go forward another 24 hours, because that's 57146. That's 57147. Okay, there we're getting very close now. So 5851, and there we have it. Okay, so we're saying we're going to do this maneuver basically over here at periapsis. So now, and we're going to do a braking burn, which is going to be, minus prograde. And the amount of prograde that we need you'll notice, like, as you do your adjustment, the minimum altitude here, it starts coming down once you input enough or a certain amount of negative prograde. See, it's starting to come down right there. So I'm going to say if I want my minimum altitude to be, let's go with 2000. So I'll just keep inputting negative prograde until that number. You can see it moves very aggressively when you get down. Okay, I think that's the right amount. I think that's the right amount of negative prograde in order to do the burn and I mean, obviously it'll get me into a parking orbit, but not only do you want to get into a parking orbit, but you want to control your altitudes, and I think this will get me into a parking orbit and give me the altitudes that I basically want, because we're saying here that my focus PED, or rather my hypothetical periapsis, this is what it will be if I do this burn, is going to be this number, which is basically 2,000 kilometers higher than the surface, and that's basically what I want. So let's close that out. Press VW to bring up target, and we're not going to do this burn for 87,000 seconds. So let's definitely warp time ahead. Start slowing things down a little bit. Okay, now we're down to 1,800. It's down to 500, 400. Okay. Let's get into the retrograde position, because that's basically going to be a retrograde burn. Now we'll go ahead and warp time ahead until we're really close. It's pretty close.
Translation. Rotation.
Let's get in a little closer. Alright, let's turn retrograde off and get the vessel rotated. And burning in 4 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and burning. And this is an enormous burn. 17,000. Wow. So let's definitely warp time ahead. And I don't even know if I brought enough fuel with me to do this large of a burn. Wow. Doesn't look like it. I've already burned 10%. I'm only down to 14. Yeah, this is, wow. Very interesting stuff here. I'm learning with all this outer planet stuff. Wow. Yeah, I'm not going to have enough fuel. Let's just go ahead and burn through it, though, and see where we end up.
Warning. Main system reset.
Okay, we're basically out of fuel. Let's go ahead and end it there. Basically out of fuel, but we've still got 6,000 worth of delta V that we would have to burn through in order to get that parking orbit that I originally set up. Now, an alternative to this would be to just get a to close the eccentricity so that you're in orbit around Jupiter, and then perhaps you could do a lot of atmospheric braking, you know, over the course of many orbits. You know, NASA does that sort of thing when they go to any planet or any moon, even the moon. They'll go around many times and do a series of burns or a series of maneuvers over a course of many orbits, because it's just more efficient to do it that way. In Orbiter, I typically don't do that in most of my flights. I try to do things more time focused and less focusing on efficiency, although I do try to be efficient. But okay, so now what am I going to do here for this? Well, I'm going to end this video because there's obviously nothing else I can do here, even though I'm at Jupiter. So in another video, I'll just have to maybe remake the flight from Mars to Jupiter, bring more fuel with me, so I can plan on doing a main engine burn around Jupiter to to be able to close in the orbit, and then from there I'd like to actually, go off to Io or something, but it's not going to work if I don't have enough fuel with me. I had another thought as to something I could try that might be able to give some hope to this mission. And basically what I thought of was, when I'm going to Jupiter, I'm not going to land on Jupiter, obviously. It's a big gas giant. There's no solid surface. So it really doesn't even make any sense to try to get into a tight orbit around the planet like you would with the Moon or Mars or Earth or Mercury, Venus. So why I'm even trying to get down to that point and get into a tight orbit in the first place just doesn't even make any sense. So, and it's also causing me to have to use a tremendous amount of fuel to perform a main engine brake if I do that, because my velocity by the time I get down to that point's really high. So the thought process here, something I kind of thought of last evening, was instead of trying to get really tight in around Jupiter, let me instead get a really high orbit around Jupiter, because I think at that point my velocity would be much lower and it wouldn't require nearly as much fuel to get into a very high parking orbit. And from that point, I should be able to then transfer to Io or something like that. So that's what I want to try in this particular Learn With Me. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to target Io over here in orbit MFD, and the reason I'm doing that is because I want to see what its altitude is around Jupiter. And I can see here that it's basically 350,000 kilometers, so it's pretty close actually to the distance between the Earth and the Moon. So I'm going to make that my target parking orbit around Jupiter, so that I can then try to get into orbit around transfer to Io once I'm at Jupiter. Does that make sense? I think this will actually work. Something I need to maybe pay attention to here, if possible, is basically what the inclination is, so that, you know, when I'm in orbit around Jupiter, I'm not completely tilted with regards to Io. I would like to come into the orbit of Jupiter and be roughly in the same plane as Io. So I've got to think, but before I do that, before I worry about getting in plane, I just kind of want to first of all test this theory and see if it'll even work. I think it will. Alright, so for starters, let me go and look at the encounter view at Jupiter, and the first thing I'm going to do
Translation
is I want to bring up my minimum altitude all the way out to this number, 350,000. So let's see if I can do that quickly with translation. Looks like that's going to take a while.
rotation
So let's instead rotate plus 90. And we'll do an outward burn here. Obviously I could do this in maneuver mode, but this is a pretty basic thing to do, so I don't really need to bring up maneuver mode just for this. So you can see there the minimum altitude's going up. And if I had planned this much sooner, then I would not require this relatively large outward burn, because I would have done this as part of my plan for coming to Jupiter in the first place. So, this is a learning experience, so just forgive me for doing this large outward burn here. Go ahead and rotate outward back to 90. So now we're at 200,000 kilometers. And we'll just make the target about 325, give us a little bit of room for difference there. We'll go with that. It's a little bit lower than the target, but since I don't know how much change I'm going to have between now and the time I get over to Jupiter, I'll just leave it a little bit on the low side. Okay. Let's go prograde back to Jupiter. Go ahead and warp time in to close the difference in the date. We've got about 9 days to go. So let's get a little closer.
translation
Watching the minimum altitude there. It's holding pretty well. So when we get a little closer, we'll go ahead and do a little bit more outward to go ahead and bring that the rest of the way up. I'd say that's good enough, because we're not having much of a change there. We're not seeing much change there, I should say. So let's go back to plus 90. Okay, and we're going to go all the way to 350 here. You'll see that. Yeah, let's go with that. Back to prograde. Kill rotate. Let's get all the way over to Jupiter now. So basically the next maneuver that I want to do is I want to get all the way to Jovian periapsis and then do a retrograde burn to see if I can get into a parking orbit. Just basically this is a test to see if this will even work. It should work. Okay, we're not far away. We're only 8,000 seconds. 7,000, 6,000. 3,000. Alright, let's get ready to go retrograde. And I don't really know when to begin this burn, so I don't think it's going to be a very large burn, but let me bring up burn time calculator and let it do the math for me. So we're saying yeah, here we are, time to periapsis, and we're just going to say go ahead and circularize the orbit for me at the appropriate time, and that says that's going to happen in 927 seconds. Let's warp time ahead to that point. Okay, we're getting pretty close. Make sure we're retrograde. And the burn in 4 seconds. 2, 1, and burning. So how much is this going to use? Okay, so we're going to have a change of 7,000 kilometers per second. That's much less than 17,000. It's still quite a bit, but I believe we'll have enough fuel for this. So let's go ahead and warp time ahead. Yeah, we're still using a tremendous amount of fuel, but we'll be able to do this. Okay, so we'll back off time acceleration back to real time. And let's take a look at our fuel status. We've got 9% left. Okay, so that seems like a viable thing to do. So we're now established in orbit around Jupiter. So yeah, with a bit more planning, this would be a really good way to go about this, I think. Now let's just see what would be required to rendezvous with Io. So we'll bring up a line plane and we'll target Io. And we're out by quite a bit. 9 degrees. We'll see if we can bring that down. I don't know if I'll have enough fuel for the rest of this, but I wanted to first see if it was even possible to get the orbit established. So I'm going to come over here to the ascending node and just see if I can get in proper plane with Io. Okay, we're not too far away from the ascending node. Let's go anti-normal. And I think we've got about a 2-minute burn ahead of us. Yep.
Warning. Main system low.
Yeah, we may run out of fuel trying to do this. it looks like we're going to run out of fuel. Okay, well, proof of concept at least.
Warning, main fuel depleted. System reset.
Okay, so we're out of fuel. So that's going to be the end of this mission here, the end of this video even. But that proves the idea. Okay, so coming from Mars to Jupiter without just being ridiculous and loading the vessel down with just a stupid amount of fuel, we could plan on arriving at Jupiter with an orbit of, much higher up above Jupiter than trying to get down around close to the surface. I think atmospheric braking at Jupiter is just out. From what I've seen here, it doesn't make any sense to even try it. Getting down that low is just going to increase your velocity a tremendous amount. You're not going to be able to get low enough in the atmosphere to have any real benefit. The only situation I could think of where using the atmosphere might make some kind of sense would be if you were going to do a sling around Jupiter and you just wanted to maybe use the atmosphere to try to steer you a little bit so that you could change your outward angle a little bit. In that case, it might make a little bit of sense, but otherwise, from what I've seen so far, and this is a learning experience, so I could be wrong, and I hold the right to change my opinion. But based on what I'm seeing, it just doesn't make any sense to even attempt atmospheric braking. And then, of course, getting down tight around Jupiter obviously also makes no sense, because think about it, even if you did get into a tight orbit around Jupiter, what are you then going to do? You can't land on Jupiter, so you're then going to have to raise your orbit up an enormous amount to do something useful, such as go to one of the moons or leave Jupiter and go somewhere else. So getting into the tight orbit makes no sense. So if we plan to come to Jupiter and we arrive and we do all of our burning so that we arrive at Jupiter with an initial orbital altitude out to 350,000 kilometers, a really high number, then we won't use as much fuel as we did to get here for the corrective burns and everything, and then we'll have a useful initial orbit that we can do something with, such as go over to Io. So that's my thinking, and I think if you understand what I'm getting at, then all that makes sense. And there's Jupiter. I'm just debating if I want to try this one more time. Try to get over to Jupiter and already be in plane with Io. Or if I just want to say I'm done here and then try this another time, back from Mars, coming over with more fuel. I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it up, leave it at that. So that's going to be the end of this video, but I think that you could see, from this experience here that, this all makes sense and this is a viable solution. So that's the end of this video. See you next time. Okay, welcome to another Orbiter 2010 video, and this is a continuation of the Learn With Me, the Mars to Jupiter Learn With Me that I'm doing. And in the last couple of videos we tried to do an atmospheric braking at Jupiter, but apparently I cannot figure out how to make that work. We're coming into Jupiter with an extremely high velocity, and by the time we get down into the atmosphere, we are burning up or having other problems. We're getting pretty close, so let's do this. we will bring up TransX, and I think we probably want the encounter view over here, and we'll set up the maneuver on this side. Now the first thing I need to do here is adjust the date. I'm saying that I'm going to reach periapsis at this date, so I want to do the maneuver at that time. So the first thing I'm going to do is bump the date forward. Even if we don't come in low enough, then we're not getting any atmospheric braking at all. And then if we go in low enough that we're getting atmospheric braking, we burn up. So it's like a lose-lose situation, and I can't seem to resolve it. So this time I'm going to forego atmospheric braking, at least for now. I'm going to give up on it and just see what it takes to just do main engine retrograde burn to get into a parking orbit. So let's go ahead and warp time ahead, get over to Jupiter, and when we're fairly close, we'll set up a TransX maneuver, a braking burn, which is going to be, minus prograde. And the amount of prograde that we need you'll notice, like, as you do your adjustment, the minimum altitude here, it starts coming down once you input enough or a certain amount of negative prograde. See, it's starting to come down right there. So I'm going to say if I want my minimum altitude to be 25851, very important that you don't forget to do that step, and it's easy to forget. So, oops, I actually need to go forward another 24 hours, because that's 57146. That's 57147. Okay, there we're getting very close now. So 5851. And there we have it. Okay, so we're saying we're going to do this maneuver basically over here at periapsis. So now, and we're going to do a